kindergarten year. Right? So if you think about it, a kindergarten teacher has the best opportunity to most differentiate instruction if they know the kids better when they enter in from the very onset, right? But let's walk through the challenge, because Durham is going to be the place where this gets fixed. I haven't seen this fixed in too many places. The challenge is who's my child care folks? Raise your hand one more time. You might have kids, if you had a classroom of 10, say that was going to kindergarten, would they all be going to the same elementary school? Almost never, right? So you have teacher A with kids that may be going to 5 different elementary schools. So challenge 1 is that portfolio work sample gets to the right elementary school, okay? So oftentimes when these things are delivered to the elementary school, they might go to the main office building or to some designee. Within that school, there might be 3 to 5 kindergarten teachers. So then does it make it to the right kindergarten teacher? Okay? So then, one of the last pieces, say it gets to the right teacher, does it get read? Does it get read? Now, I happen to think kindergarten teachers are some of the best people on the earth. I'll say that. Absolutely some of the best people. And so it's not with bad intention, right? It might be the time in which it takes to get things. It might be the mass. What we've heard from kindergarten teachers is that they send too much stuff. And the pre-K does this type of assessment, and the K does this type of assessment, and they don't always align. So there's things that can be worked out there. But the truth be told, they just have not been used and utilized as much. And it's partly the pathway system, and it's the utility of it. So one of the elements that we did is we sat with pre-K teachers and K teachers in the same room and said, K teachers, what would be the most useful? And they said, if it could be 1 page and cover these things. And that became our pilot for 1 sheet that was used. And actually now Cleveland, who is a partner with us, has a 2-sided form, and they've been looking to see this as one of the things that they're working on, is simplicity in this and then getting to the right place. One thing that they are in the process of, and maybe you can beat them to the punch, is the getting it to the right place. So they're looking at the way to get parents to be able to sign off on that form, and it gets then loaded into the district database, and then the teacher can pull down the kids that are in their classroom, so that it's all done through electronics, and it's more assured that it would get to the right place. Again, it gets into confidentiality and releases and all that kind of thing. But if that is the most promising practice that's been out there, we got to find a way to make it work. Okay, transition folder. Okay, so create the story. So that's very similar to what we kind of embedded with the scavenger hunt, but very simply, and some kids may not make it to the scavenger hunt, that booklet's given, but some type of story individualized to the school that talks about, most of us have probably seen, the places you will go. Something similar to, the places you will be in kindergarten or something like that, which has worked really well. And lastly, I put up the dramatic play one. So the dramatic play was also kind of part of the scavenger hunt. I told you that the kiddos went through, they did the scavenger hunt, and then the last piece was that there was a picture of they're supposed to draw the first day of school on the cover. A picture of the building or anything like that. And it was this kiddo that had gone through the thing, fairly quiet kid. And the final thing was the drawing of the picture. And I walked by and I happened to see him, and he had a black crayon. And you know how kids don't always hold a pen or pencil right at that time, and that's one of the things that they work on. But it had that grip, the death grip, and it was just drawing the black building. And I'm okay, I'm gonna stand here for a moment. And then he took a red crayon, and he's going to where the windows were, and he's like, you're making the windows red. Is your school going to be red? And he's like, that's blood. And I'm like, okay, I think maybe we should continue this conversation a little bit more. And when I said this with the first one we talked about anxiety, this is the kid that the domestic violence. That mom was the victim of domestic violence, and the blood was representing the blood of what was going to happen if he was going to be in school and his mom was left unprotected at home. So, dramatic play, art play, those things for that kiddo who can't necessarily say, hi, I'm Johnny, I'm going to be your kindergarten kid this year. I learned best through through music and manipulatives and right? But they tell a story through those things of puppets and that type of art work. So those are the things, is paying attention and individualizing and having kids a part of all these different practices. Make sense? So what teams do when you have community-based teams is they look at the data within their neighborhoods, they look at the populations, and they talk with the parents about what things are going to be most effective in their area. It's not to say that all this stuff is easy, right? This is national data about the most common barriers to effective transition, and there are problems that we have everywhere, and they're not easy solutions always. So some of the most common ones is that salaries aren't there to support summer work, or salaries don't support the extra work that's off school hours. So this has been where we've been really blessed and fortunate oftentimes to work with local foundations or work with other types of funders to compensate teachers for some of this time that's extra involved. And other schools that have been very creative, that they allow some of the what would be in-service days, they let teachers trade up for this type of work so that they can use that in this regard as well. So there perhaps is creative ways that we can get around that element as well. Lack of funds for transition events. This is again where we work to a couple things. One is foundations and that support, but that can't be the answer to everything, right? So how do schools build into their budgets pieces of this? And we found that Title I is meant to support transition. So is there some Title I funds that can fund this? Title I funds also support parent engagement, parent involvement. So can parts of the parent engagement, parent involvement dollars be kind of streamlined towards transition? And are there other creative ways that we can look at that? Class list generated too late, that's going to be a problem until we get the enrollment piece down. So we have to look at those practices, and it will get better. It will get better. Lack of parent response to transition invitations. Again, that's the report from the school. Making the events and activities more parent-centered, or making it more engaging and fit with what parents want to do, would be elements to help reduce that. Having parents a part of the planning process for that also drastically helps to change that as well. A transition plan not available at school or district level. Does everyone know that if you're a Title I school, you're required to have a transition plan? Most schools do have a transition plan. It's called the Head Start plan, right? And so a Head Start plan, which is a basic plan, is adopted as the district-wide transition plan. Again, the loss and the gap there is not all the kids are Head Start kids that are coming into school. So we have to be more expansive when we look at our transition plans. And there's lots of tools, templates, and I'd be happy to share the ones that we use for Pittsburgh, which are not perfect, but I also have the ones that are used across other districts that we can look at something that might be very effective. And lastly, there's so many messages out there. Part of why we went with the branding, why perhaps you guys went with branding, is that there's one kind of messenger for this type of work, that there's an icon that we can hold to that says kindergarten and good, and it's paired those two together. We use everyone's used the pyramid method right now, the universal plan, that we have practices that affect the entire of a community, so that's website branding, those elements that go out, all the way down to the kids that have the most need with outreach, door-to-door, and clubs and groups to support those kids with the greatest need. So that's kind of the realm of approaches that are out there. Skip that. The final element, and this really ties into what's our role, right? This last year, we've been doing this for about 7 years. The foundation said, we are going to stop funding you. This is the last time. And so it has to be sustainable, and it has to be established within that time that the funding from the foundations can end. Amen, right? And that's the way that's always been a goal. Like every time that you have funding, you're like, we have to find a way during the time that we have this to keep it sustainable or replicable and all those wonderful things. And so the last time that we went to and partnered with our district, we said, for this to be something that's established, ingrained, this has been the model that has to work. And this is taken and borrowed from the build model, which is used for pre-K and potentially universal pre-K. And it's these elements that transcend almost any type of thing. First of all, quality standards. What's the expectation by school, and across the district on what? So every school is expected to have 2 transition events, and they should be from this type of design, right? Every school should have a benchmark for when kids are enrolled, a benchmark for what percent of kids show up on the first day of school, so we have something to gauge ourselves by, right? So that's element 1. And that really, our district said, we want this because we know the results for our kids will be better if we do this. To get to those benchmarks, you have to have the proper supports. So our office is typically contracted to do the professional development for teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, those that are kind of implementing this work. And so we do, a part of their leadership weeks, we do training and guidance on that, as well as schools that have the greatest need. We do technical assistance and training on site to those schools that need the most kind of bolstering during that time. You need an accountability structure. Whose hand is going to be held, or whose hand is going to be reminded when these benchmarks aren't met or aren't. And typically, I'm a social worker, strengths-based. What rewards and incentives are in place for when these things are met? And so we built into the principal rubric and some of the school-based rubrics for their, not their salary. It's not like their salary is lost, but they get a little bump in salary when benchmarks are met. So there's some incentive school by school for these things to be put into practice. The financial resources, this costs some money. Our school district has been good about finding creative ways to use Title I resources and other resources, as well as our United Way has helped with other supportive services. Well, we do a certain element of the program. Our United Way has started the Be There campaign, which is a district-wide attendance strategy. So there's monthly pizza parties and stuff for good attendance or improved attendance. We have universal calling for when kids have missed days. We piloted for the last 2 years a phone call within 2 schools. A phone call every time a kindergarten kid misses a day of school. Anyone know how many phone calls that was? 1,000, at least 1,000 per school per year. That's how many missed days in just one school for kindergarten kids. But what it did is it allowed us to have a conversation with families about why kids are missing. And so we kind of tabulated the most common reasons, and it really has been neighborhood-specific. Dangerous walkway, asthma and access to healthcare within a certain region, homelessness within one pocket, and the delay in transportation. The typical delay, if you were from one homeless shelter to temporary housing to another shelter, was 7 missed days based on getting the bus records aligned. So things that when we know them, can be fixed. The dangerous walkway, we had volunteers from a local church that said we will have walkers from the neighborhood to the school that kind of signed up for helping kids get to school, and then parents felt more safe during that regard too. So there's different ways that you can look at, but it's kind of that family, that community resources that were needed. And then kind of the celebration of community awareness. Again, part of our United Way has been the work to have school-based celebrations of attendance, or to have community celebrations of partners that made a difference in this work. So just in June there was a big community celebration that said thank you to all the people that helped kids to be there, to the teacher, to the church, to the you name it, that there was kind of you did the good work, now let's kind of celebrate the good work and let's continue forward. So that's the build model that we've used to kind of ingrain this into the district. We're 1 year in. We've made great strides, but it's still a work in progress. But our belief and our hope is that we'll be there in the next 2 years. I want to mention before we go into the final piece, the Ready for Any website. I'm going to put that up there. And I say this, our branding is different from your branding, and that's okay. The branding piece is just an element that we found to be very effective. And so we've always believed you can take it and adapt it as you so see fit. But on the website is the strategies and tools that we've learned. We've now, having done this for a number of years, have created toolkits for this. So if you were a community group that wanted to go do outreach to find kids, we now have a toolkit for community outreach. If you want to think about how you do a first day event, there's a toolkit for the first day. And through all these practices, most of them have a toolkit, or there's one that's very close to being finished. If you want to see what it looks like, there's videos. There's videos of the first day event. There's videos of parents talking about the impact it had when they did these transition practices, and the materials for families. One of the examples that I give is a calendar. Our state had for years put out a kindergarten, here I come, kind of a year-long stuff you could do. And what we found oftentimes with the stuff that went out from the state is that it was very high literacy. So we worked to kind of make low literacy and the calendar itself as an educational tool. And these are, we've done that for 3 years now. This will be our 4th year when it comes to this fall. And we put it out, it's a free download. We've been fortunate that we've been funded to kind of test it out and then give it away. Kind of nice, right? There is such thing as a free lunch some days, right? So we try to keep all our resources for either free or for something that we have to print and send you for the cost. So that's the 2 things that we've been doing. So please, there's the website there, readyforready.org. We are in an era of multiple ways to get a hold of people. So LinkedIn, email, phone, website, Facebook, and Twitter. And we tend to use the Facebook page as a resource page where other groups that are trying to do this work, we showcase something that we've tried, or we've showcased something that we've learned, and it's kind of like a sharing place for best practices that are out there. That's the presentation point. We're going to do action planning, but I do want to give a moment for there's questions about the first piece. They got it. They got it.
You explained everything perfectly, Ken. No questions. I'm sure there are lots of rich ideas floating around, and I know that the time has come. It's noon. We've been in the room a long time. We need you to hang in your tables for just a little bit longer. What we'd like you to do now is to turn to each other at the table, introduce yourselves as you need to, and think about what this means for your group, for you individually in your work, for your community, for the role that you're playing while you're here in this room. What will you do? What do you want to see happen? And what can you contribute to that effort? Again, you wear multiple hats, you have multiple roles. Pick one for who you are today, and consider who you're sitting with at the table. Some of you may be in very cohesive groups centered around an elementary school, and you may be able to work very specifically together. Others may find yourself doing more individual work or talking in dyads with the people right next to you. But consider, what is it that you want to see in your community? What is it that you have to contribute? Also, what else do you want to know? What are you still wondering about? And Ken has prompted us on several occasions to consider, what is it that Durham most wants to know or needs to know as we think about a cohesive, community-wide transition effort with Eddie being ready for kindergarten.
Yeah, so again, the 3 things I never knew. So something that you learned from today. I wonder, and I'm going to put the indicators that I had put out there before, so it might be, I wonder what our enrollment data looks like, or I wonder what our chronic absence rate is, so the data points that are out there, and then I plan to. I never knew, I wonder what locally, and I plan to. I'll go back to the data points. And on your table is a piece of white Post-it. Feel free to write down your group's responses.